Hi Mustangs, this is Ms. Brooks yet again. This is the second video for NTI Social Studies. Yesterday you were working on the vocabulary and some of the sheets on those. Hopefully you got those done because those need to be done. We are going to continue forth on to ancient Egypt. Today we're going to be working on some of the more well-known inventions and structures of ancient Egypt. But before I get into that, I do want to address parents. Feel free to watch my videos with your students, with your child, my students. Sometimes I get a kick out of what the parents think, and just being involved with your child and their education is wonderful. My mom was always involved too. She always wanted to know what I was learning, and she would learn some stuff on the way too. Some things that you don't really normally think about. So if you want to work with your child, feel free. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me or dojo me. Same with the kids. You guys can message me too. And another thing I wanted to bring up before we get into today's video. Today in history, I do still want to continue that. For parents who don't know, I always had a little spot in my classroom on the part of the board where it's today in history. So every day in history, there's something significant that happened that I'll post on the board, and then we'll talk about the significance of it. Today, 115 years ago today, this is 1905, Franklin Delano Roosevelt married Eleanor Roosevelt. So 115 years ago, they got married. I just thought that was a cute little fact because Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the most strong and independent first ladies in history. Like, she did so many good things for charity work, and she was just a very strong woman, along with her husband, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, during the time of the Great Depression and all of that. So just keep in mind today about what the significance of that is, because if they didn't get married, how would that have changed history? So that leaves us to continuing today's social studies lesson. So again, we're going to be talking about some of the inventions from ancient Egypt, and we will get into the structures. Those of you in Miss Hurst's homeroom class, we're going to be readdressing the pyramids, some of the structures and the purposes for those, because when we think of ancient Egypt, let's face it, we think about the pyramids. So let's go ahead and get started with the pyramids. So the pyramids, obviously, they have a square base and they point upwards. Now, there are the pyramids of Giza, all of those pyramids. Ironically, they all face in the northern direction. Now, that's a new fact that I recently discovered. I didn't know they went in one direction. But here's one thing that we do need to address. Yes, they were used as burial grounds for nobles and pharaohs. However, many significant pharaohs from ancient Egypt, more so in the New Kingdom, like around the 1000s BC era, those significant pharaohs were not buried in the pyramids. Now, go ahead and pause this video and think about why you think that is. Because the pyramids are so significant. There's 138 pyramids in ancient Egypt. How come some of this very significant people very significant pharaohs in ancient Egypt, how come they weren't buried with everybody else? So go ahead and pause the video right here, and then we will come back. Okay, we should be back now. Hopefully you had some time to think about it. Really, the first thing that people probably say is, well, if they're important figures, they want to keep them away from danger. If you guys read the passage that we did while we were back in school during reading class, we were talking about the Great Pyramid and how King Cheops' body, his mummy, was stolen along with all of his jewels and memorabilia that was found in that pyramid. Now, yes, that was common for a lot of pyramids. People see a pyramid and they're like, oh, there's jewels in there, let's go. Now, with these significant rulers, we're talking King Tut. We found King Tut, Ramses II, possibly Nefertiti. All of those new kingdom pharaohs, they were found in the Valley of the Kings. Now, Valley of Kings. Some of you guys had a map and you're like, okay, I know where Valley of the Kings is now. Now I know why it's important. We did find King Tut's body. We found many other bodies. Now, some of you guys are like, well, how did they find them? Now, what they would do is, it's kind of like going underground, and it's an entire maze. So you could be led into a completely different direction. There are many hallways, many rooms. A lot of those rooms did contain what the Egyptians thought were offerings to the afterlife. So bringing up the concept again of life after death. The Egyptians believed that when someone died, they were not fully dead. They were just reborn into a different life where they could never die again. And what they did is they would fill these rooms up with so many things that they thought that person would need in the afterlife. So that brings up gold. Obviously, you're going to need to be wealthy in the next life, or food or drink. You're going to need those. If someone liked the boats on the Nile, you could put some of those in there and bring them with you. All of those things they thought were going with that mummy or with that person in the afterlife. That's where you get into the mythology and all of that as well. So the pyramids, they would have the rooms for the memorabilia, the offerings. And then they would have rooms for the actual sarcophagus and the mummy. Now, think of it this way. A lot of recent pyramids, especially in the New Kingdom, they would either bury that ruler in the Valley of the Kings where no one would even think to look, or what they would do is they would actually create secret passages and secret rooms to make you think you're in the right direction. And that's why it's so important to understand, yes, the Egyptians thought ahead of time, there could be crooks down here. We need to make a maze to where they're going to be lost. Like, they're just not going to be able to find anything. They were very secretive. A lot of people think booby traps, like from Indiana Jones. There were some of those, but not in the way that you think. There weren't like arrows coming from the walls or anything like that. Mainly, it's just trying to get them lost. That's pretty much how it went. So the pharaohs and the sarcophagus, those are in different rooms, everything like that. Now, obviously, if you watch documentaries on ancient Egyptian, like archaeology and digging, finding artifacts, I really recommend some of those that you watch because it's actually really interesting what they find. And when you look through the winding tunnels in the pyramid or the Valley of the Kings, you will see hieroglyphics on the walls. And those usually represented who was buried down here, the significance of that time period, just anything you can imagine. Many times it was also contributing to what they believed was the gods, like how wonderful the gods were and everything, which obviously we know those to be myth, but that was their form of religion or belief system. So when we talk about the actual structure for the pyramids, now obviously, like I said, a definition of a pyramid is a square bottom and it comes up into a triangle. Now, what's very interesting about the pyramids themselves in ancient Egypt was there's 138 of them, some with multiple bodies hidden throughout the whole interior of the pyramid. Just to build one pyramid took 200,000 workers. Think about that. 200,000 workers. That tells you how many people were just in the lower class to build the pyramids. Now, that's a lot of people. And it would take 20 to 30 years just to build one pyramid. So this whole span, imagine creating 138 pyramids with 200,000 people. 138, and it takes 20 years just to build one pyramid. That's insane. Now, the Great Pyramid, that took about 22 years. 22 years roughly. And the blocks, every single block with any pyramid is limestone. But with the Great Pyramid, if you take the bottom of the pyramid and you measure that out, it's a perfect square. So obviously they had to know a little bit of math in order to get that perfect square at the bottom as the base. Now, a lot of you guys are wondering, well, limestone's not that heavy, is it? The blocks that they used for the Great Pyramid alone, some of them weighed about 15 tons. That's equivalent to 15 adult elephants. That, I would not be able to do that. I am weak. I just couldn't do it. Now, a lot of you guys also questioned over, before we went on NTI days, you guys were like, well, how did they do it? And I gave you some time to think about it. Even historians don't really know exactly how they did it. What they believed happened was they had a system of ramps that would help them. But even with that, we still don't have a lot of information because we would have to go from the place where the workers would carve out these 15-ton blocks of limestone. They would have to bring them all the way to the pyramids and then even lift them on top. So we still don't know how they even processed all of that. It's mind-boggling. We're still trying to figure that out. And that's the big thing of history that I still want you guys to remember is not everything is 100% certain. Not everything has to be 100% certain. We are still learning. Even as adults and you get into a job, you're still trying to learn. Understand that. Another interesting thing that we can talk about the pyramids, and if you look on Ducksters.com about the Great Pyramids, you'll see this too. All of the pyramids are on the west side of the Nile River. Now that's interesting. You think there could be pyramids like all throughout. Now, a lot of the pyramids though, I told you guys the capital currently of ancient Egypt is Cairo. It is when ancient Egypt was being formed, it wasn't Cairo. Cairo did not exist yet. It was Memphis, like Tennessee, Memphis. Memphis in ancient Egypt was where the pharaohs stayed, and a lot of the pyramids are over there for obvious reasons, because all the nobles were there, all the pharaohs were over there. They also consider that to be the land of the dead, more so because the whole idea of life after death. So it's a limestone. It was always in a perfect square at the bottom. Really, that's all we know about the pyramids other than what we just covered. And if you have questions, just ask me. But even historians don't know a lot about these pyramids. Now, we talked about the pyramids. Let's go on to the inventions portion. Now, this one I'm not going to be too worried about. If you look in your little packet, I made hard copies for everyone, but I know a lot of you are going to want to do this on Google Classroom. But I want you to look at this just in case. You should have already done the vocabulary. Before you move on to the inventions portion, I want you to do this one. Now, we talked, some of us already talked about this in class. It's backwards on my screen. It says, look at the picture. Below, write down anything you know about it. Then write what you wonder about this picture. Now, we will address this in tomorrow's video. What do I know about this picture? Obviously, we know it has to do with ancient Egypt, but how? For these both, I want you to write in sentences or question form. What do I wonder about this picture? Go nuts with what you're wondering, because honestly, some of you guys are really creative and very, very clever, and I absolutely know that. Get creative here. I need your brains to work, all right? So work on it, okay? So that's what I want for that. Now, the next page is the inventions. It should look like this. Obviously, there's not a lot to work with. There's clock, sundial, paper, and the 365-day calendar. Not only that, there's another thing that I want to address too. I will address it more in depth when we talk about ancient Egyptian myths, because that plays into a whole bunch of stuff. But what I want to address now is just the ones that are on the Google Classroom. So we know about a clock, right? A sense of time. That's a big thing, is a sense of time. Currently, we use a 24 hours makes one day like system, right? 12 hours usually for the day, roughly, and then 12 hours at night. You can thank the Egyptians for that, because there is actually a myth that they believed helped them produce this 24-hour system. Now, again, I'll get more into the myth later, but if you guys remember when we talked about ancient Greece, parents, unless you went over this with your child or your child was talking to you about it, I'll go over it one more time because I love this myth to begin with. It is not the actual explanation, but that was how their religion and their gods tried to play it out. So in ancient Greece, we talked about the myth of Hades and Persephone. And Persephone was the goddess of like fertility. She did flowers. She made everything bloom. It was, I mean, she's the daughter of Demeter. What can you do? She got it from her mom, obviously. Now, Hades kidnapped Persephone, and there was a whole rivalry going on between Persephone's mother and Hades, and in the end, they came up with a system where 6 months out of the year, Persephone would be with her mother on the mortal world, and then the other 6 months of the year, she would be with Hades, and nothing would grow. And that was how the Greeks described spring and summer, where Persephone was with her mother and everything was blooming and vibrant and warm, to when the 6 months where it's cold and everything is dying, fall and winter, because obviously the goddess of flowers and fertility was nowhere on earth. That was how the ancient Greeks and their religion described natural occurrences such as spring, summer, and then fall and winter. That's how they described it. Now, the myth that I will talk about later on does have to deal with the 24-hour clock. Thank the Egyptians for that. But there's a myth also. Obviously, we know why there's a 24-hour clock. It's how the earth rotates. But ancient Egyptians did not know that. They described this as the journey of Ra. So Ra being the sun god, he would travel with the sun 12 hours in the daytime, and then he would travel 12 hours in the underworld in 24 different kingdoms. Now, we will get to that in another video because it's very complicated and it can be very confusing. But because of that, they developed the 24-hour system. Again, we already know scientifically why this happens, but this is how the Egyptians described it. So we already have the clock, and we have where the sun is located. That also plays into the sundial. It would tell what time. If you don't know what a sundial is, it basically takes the sun from the sky and the sun's location and the shadow that would come onto this little sundial would tell you what time of the day it was. If it was like later in the afternoon or very, very early morning or midday, it would tell you because of where the shadow is, where the sun's shadow is. The first ever recorded sundial we have from ancient Egypt, they found, surprisingly, in the Valley of Kings. But it's not the kind of metal sundial that we're used to seeing where there's a little handle up top to help with the shadow and then a metal circle around. It's just a piece of paper that's kind of halved, and they drew different sections out. Now, how that created a sundial, we're still trying to figure that out. But it helped them with time. We know that for certain, and that is 100% an early sundial. You should have a picture of this in your notes. Let me see if I can get these notes out. Let me see if I can get them out. Okay. You should see on your notes, this is what the early sundial looked like. And you're probably like, what in the world? How can you even tell what time that is? If you see, there's a hole. So obviously they had to put something in that hole there to help with where the shadows come from. Right? So we got that down. We're good on that. Following along in your notes, that's always good to do. Paper, we already established in the first video. With paper, they used papyrus, which is a kind of a, I would say it's almost like a bamboo. It's a water plant stem that they would have to like make into paper, which it's a very rough brown colored paper to begin with, but again, it got the job done. And they would record some things on there. The 365-day calendar. Yes, the Egyptians did that. They made the 365-day calendar. Again, that one's not more so with myth. It's more so, again, how they described time with the sundial, and they realized that there was a trend with the seasons, and they're like, oh, well, the Nile's overflowing at this time, so we might want to think about that. And it does it every 365 days, roughly. So Again, the Nile would flow around July through August, so that kind of helped them determine months also. So I think that's kind of cool. Sorry, I'm just really tired today. I bet a lot of you guys are tired too with being stuck in the house, and some of you guys are liking it, but if you're anything like me, sometimes I just need to get out and go outside and figure out what to do so I'm not bored out of my mind. But I have you guys, and that's completely okay with me. So again, this video, I hope I clarified some things with you, especially about the pyramids. We will get into more. I know a lot of you guys are really interested in the mummification process. And we will get to that, I promise. So again, the assignments I want you to do for today, let me look at my schedule too. Yes. Yes. Okay. So tomorrow's schedule with social studies, we're going to be learning about artifacts. Now, those artifacts are going to be really, really important, so just keep an eye on those. What I want you to do today is do the I wonder. Obviously, you guys can tell what this is. But I want you to start asking more questions, because even though we don't know 1,000% certainty what the purpose of any of this was or how it was built or anything, I still want you guys to ask questions, because that's how history is made. We ask questions about what happened, and we make hypotheses. We make guesses based on what we've learned. And I want you to do this page. Now, some of you guys are probably confused. If you do the hard copy, just cut these out and just place them on top. I'm not going to be too picky. So that's it for today, guys. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to message me through email or Google Classroom. All right, bye, guys.